Alright, so we're going to try plying on a video. This is our 100% angora, American angora yarn. 3 singles. This is the yarn that takes somewhere around 12 hours to make an 80-ounce skein of yarn because we spin it thin. It's not a good knot that I just tied. It might be unlikely that this stays together. So of course when you're plying is spinning in the opposite direction. So you spun your singles in one direction and then you put them all together and you ply them in the opposite. So as I'm plying, I might start out slowly and just kind of take a look at the yarn. But then of course it will speed up because that's what we do. So this yarn is made from the fiber, the wool from our own angora rabbits. And it is, we start out with 1.02 ounces 3 of those, and then we end up with 80 grams because after you get done spinning it, and there's some loss with spinning, there's some loss after you wash it, loss of weight. But this yarn is the yarn that is going to be available February 1st, which I'm very excited about because it will have its own pattern with cables, its own hat pattern, which will be free using this yarn. This yarn started somewhere around 10 years ago because I could not find a soft yarn. I could not find a yarn that was real, so there was not a yarn made of angora. There wasn't a yarn that was made of angora that was ethical, like ethically harvested. There wasn't a yarn that I could find that had the quality that I wanted. So of course, I said, well, I'm just going to figure out how to make it. This is spun to be consistent, to be a consistent yarn, not to be an art yarn. So when spinning this, it's important to keep the yarn the same weight. So to spin it the same thickness for each single, because if you don't, you end up with a yarn that's like not very thick, and then not very thin, and all of it in one skein, which is not what you want when you're doing a consistent yarn. So in plying, the bobbin gets filled pretty fast. But when spinning a single, it takes a little bit longer, obviously, because the single is thinner. This video is going to literally be start to finish. How long does it take to actually ply this yarn? And for spinning each of these singles, spinning and hand carding each of these singles, it takes anywhere from 3+ hours to hand card and just spin one single. That doesn't include actually trimming the wool off the rabbit. It doesn't include the care that's required taking care of the rabbit, because all of it matters in the final yarn. If you start with angora that isn't a high quality wool, then your final product isn't going to be a high quality yarn. So if you start with an angora wool that let's say it breaks very easily because perhaps the rabbit was sick, or perhaps the the situation that the rabbit was in was just stressful, a very highly stressful situation. Perhaps genetically the rabbit is just not, did not inherit good genetics for wool production. Whatever the reason is, the wool you start with matters, and that goes back to the rabbit and how the rabbit's housed and how it's taken care of. All of that, all of that really matters in your finished wool. And that's something that's why this yarn took so long to make, because it wasn't just a matter of like learning to spin. It was a matter of learning how to get the best products and to get the best quality products. And yes, you have the skills, you have the techniques, but also the best tools, figuring out which were the best tools to make the yarn that I wanted to make that I couldn't find. And really, when you think about it, like when you're knitting, you're crocheting, you're weaving, you want a yarn that you enjoy using. And then once you're done knitting, crocheting, weaving, whatever, you want it to be a yarn that has created a finished product that you want to use this finished product. So if you make the yarn and you use it, turn it into a hat, you want that hat, all that effort that you spent, you want it to be a hat that is astounding. A hat that you enjoy using, a hat that brings you satisfaction and contentment. Otherwise, it's a waste of time to use poor quality angora from a poor quality rabbit that isn't properly taken care of. It just does not produce, there's nothing positive about it, there's nothing good about it. So it took a lot of time to breed the quality wool that I wanted to create the finished products. And of course it matters how you shear your rabbit, or pluck or however you remove the wool. It matters into the finished product of the yarn. So the finished item, the finished hat, the finished whatever you're making with it, how that was harvested mattered. How it was actually removed from the rabbit. So if you have a rabbit that perhaps it's somebody who's not paying close enough attention and they're just clipping the wool with scissors or a pair of clippers, and the wool is like different levels, and then they go back and then they kind of clip over a section again that they already clipped, and then you get second cuts, and that's something that it sheds in the yarn. All those little, all the little bits, they come off and they shed in the yarn. So, when you think about making yarn, in some ways it's so very simple. But also when you think about making yarn, and you want more than just something that, yes, that looks like yarn. When you want something of higher quality, each piece of the process is examined, and each piece of the creation of that finished product is scrutinized, because all of it matters. All of it, absolutely all of it. Even the housing that the rabbit is in matters. How the rabbit is cared for in summer, how the rabbit is cared for in winter. You're really looking at the details that all add up in a situation. So yarn, of course, when you take it from beginning to end, the amount of knowledge and the amount of skills required in each of those individual sections, in each of those individual things, the knowledge required to care for a rabbit, the knowledge required to match the appropriate housing for the climate that you're in, for the potential predators that you have. All of these, all of these bits and pieces all come together. And for people who, who are hand spinners and who've been spinning for a while, you can tell, your hands can tell, your eyes can tell, you can recognize when you have a fiber that you're spinning that is a good fiber, that the quality is above the rest, that this is different, there's differences. It'll feel different, it spins just like, everything is just kind of comes together. And that's really by design. When a good fiber is produced by a farmer, by a shepherd, by a rabbit breeder, when a good wool is produced, it is not an accident to produce that. It isn't an accident at all. It is something that requires such consideration. And you think of it as kind of like a house. You can build a house. You can build a house to look like a house. But inside the bones of that house, the walls of that house, there's things that you might not be able to see, but the choices that went into making that, they matter. So, what materials were used to make the house? In the end, it matters. All the choices, just like when you can't see inside of a wall of a house, all the choices in a yarn matter to the finished product of the yarn. You think about like the joy of when you have this yarn and you're sitting and you're knitting, and the choice of like selecting the pattern, sitting down to start it, when you're casting on, it's the beginning and all the hours you spend with it, and those final moments when you cast off your item, if you're knitting, and it's done, and you hold the creation, you hold what you've spent so long making, and it's required something of you that is very opposite from much of life. It requires nothing instantaneous. Like when you're working with this, there's nothing instantaneous about making yarn by hand, using traditional methods. It's all a process, and so it's all a journey. Like when I make yarn, when I spin yarn, when I ply yarn like this, sometimes it's almost like a meditation. The repetitiveness of everything is soothing and very, except when you get your hair in yarn, it's a very, just a very soothing, repetitive process, and it almost like lulls you and calms you down when you know what you're doing after you get that past the initial like having to learn what you're doing and all that stuff, and then you get to the point where you don't have to concentrate super hard on what you're doing anymore, because your hands, your feet, your body, everything knows what to do, and you just do it. It turns into this much more relaxing event and option in life. I was watching a documentary that's on YouTube around the Pyrenees, and it was just about these women and the culture that the sheep that would be shorn, the wool would be washed, it would be carded, it'd be dried, it'd be carded and spun and turning it in and then knit into like socks or sweaters, and just watching that process. And something that really struck me that I miss and wish I had more in life of is that these people used to come together to a house, and they would come with their spinning wheels and their wool and their knitting needles and everything, and they would spend time together. And when I think about it, I have enjoyed each time I've been with others, and we're all doing our fiber arts, whatever. Each time is enjoyable, whether it's the first time you're meeting people and meeting new people, and you're all together, and the knitting needles are going, and the spinning wheels are spinning, and everyone's just talking about their yarnie experiences in life. I think I've never met a yarnie. I've never met somebody, who it's been a struggle to get along with. It's like when you spin yarn, there's like a shared camaraderie and a shared understanding that you know something that people don't know anymore. So it's almost like this magic, like Rumpelstiltskin, where turning straw into gold, basically turning wool into clothes. Like, you have this magic, and I don't think there's enough magic in this current life, this current world. I don't think there's a lot of magic in this world in that same way. Yes, there's sure, watch a movie, there's all sorts of amazing animations in graphics and just different things that are fantastic. But the magic of creating something, and creating something real, and creating something that's helpful and not harmful, creating something that's pure, and creating something that is truly good. That's magic, literally. It's a pretty amazing magic. And spinning is the anti-chaos, and it's the anti-frantic, and the anti-rat race. When you just want to get away from all of it, pick up your wool, pick up your fiber, because you'll get away. It just forces you away in a gentle manner. It's something in life that doesn't cause pain, doesn't cause harm. In fact, it's a relief. So when I'm taking my hands and if I'm going like this, I'm making sure that this is getting all of, if there's vegetable matter, if there's, checking the consistency. Do I feel a bump? Do I feel a spot that's higher? I'll use my nails and try to grab it out. So I'll use my eyes, I'm looking at it, and I'll take a look. how's it going? But when you do that, if you use your fingertips, for example, going like this, be careful because you can get a sliver. If there's, depending on if you have vegetable matter and what it is. That's happened before. Yeah, like somebody, you just said spinning doesn't have pain. That sounds painful. Well, that sort of pain is nothing compared to the pain of the insanity of life currently. Which is why we have free patterns and free YouTube videos and just sharing this option with the world. Let's spin up a section of hair then. I have my Lazy Kate on the floor. My Lazy Kate holds all 3 bobbins. And the hope, every time I'm making like a 2-ply or 3-ply and I'm using separate bobbins, spinning, applying from the separate bobbins, the hope is always that the bobbins they run out at the same time, but they're exhausted at the same time. Because then I've done a good job spinning the singles consistently. When they don't run out at the same time, it is always a clue. It's always a hint. It's always a whisper that you can do better. You can do better with this. Your yarn, like, is a good teacher. It tells you. You just have to pay attention to it. It tells you its, its weak points. It tells you its strengths. It tells you what you're doing well. It shows you what you've done well. It shows you what you could improve. By the end, I usually end up with a little pile of vegetable matter on my lap. Just because as you're going, as you're spinning, this is unwashed angora as you're plying, and so it falls out, which is what you want it to do. You don't want it to stay in. One of the things I've learned in life, working with fiber and working with yarn, is use your own fiber. Then turn it into yarn. Then use your own yarn. And that also has told me so much. Do you like the yarn that you produced? Do you want to use the yarn you produced? When you spin the yarn and you've made it, and you go and you use it, what's it like? Do you enjoy it? Is there joy in what you've made, in the finished product? And on the flip side of that is don't be too harsh with yourself, because that can be easy to do as well. Especially if you're just starting out. There is a place for those yarns when you're just starting out, the thick, bumpy, lumpy yarns. Those are just beautiful yarns for scarves and beautiful yarns for hats. Beautiful yarns if you make a lot to make a blanket with that texture. You can use simple stitching and make a beautiful texture with that sort of yarn. And so there's a place You know, there's a place for it. I remember the first yarn I spun. It was from like, I received free like scraps of wool. This is from Icelandic sheep, and it was just free wool. It wasn't really great wool. It was Icelandic, so it had a lot of hair in it, and I left the hair in it. So it was a coarse wool. Well, I mixed it with my angora. I blended it with my angora, but I didn't blend it too well. I very minimally blended these two fibers together. And then I used a drop spindle and just started spinning. And the yarn was a single. It was so thick, I left it as a single. It was a single of bulky. And I crocheted a hat with it. And the hat was so thick. I would joke that you did not have to wear anything else with that hat. You could just wear that hat. Because it was just, the thing was so thick, it was so warm, it was like, you know, a creation all unto itself. I think those experiences, they're great. They're great experiences, and you know, I think about so many years ago, from first starting to, think about that yarn compared to this yarn. I was so proud of my first yarn. And then quickly as I continue on, I realize that, oh boy, we've got some improving that I can do. But hopefully it's, like if you're spinning or you're thinking about spinning or you're plying yarn and working, hopefully you work with your yarn. Hopefully you try it out yourself and take a look. What do you like with it? The actual act of using and the yarn, knitting and crocheting and weaving, it definitely provides lessons. And they're not harsh lessons, they're gentle lessons. I was never a spinner who sat in a classroom and took a class to spin. I watched a lot of YouTube videos, read books, and I just picked up the wool and started trying. Just started doing it. And, you know, there's so many different fibers to try too. And each of them, you know, each of them is an experience. I started with angora rabbits as my first fiber animal because I wanted soft yarn, and I like rabbits a lot. And it's just so my favorite. Of course, now we have 3 alpacas and 3 sheep. And the alpaca fiber is, of course, wonderful as well. Very enjoyable. In the sheep, that's fun to spin, especially Ron's wool. Ron is our dignified sheep. He has his own very dignified collar with a bell. He's the only one out there who's mature enough to handle it. We have a sheep named Harry. We have Harry, Hermione, and Ron from Harry Potter. And they're all thin sheep. But Harry, I don't know about that sheep. Like, he does what he wants, when he wants, wherever he wants. He doesn't care. If someone's in front of him, like an alpaca's in front of him, he just keeps walking. Everyone moves for Harry. Harry doesn't move for anyone else. And when I bring in hay, a bale of hay, Harry is going to be there. And what he tries to do is even if I'm holding the bale of hay, he tries to jump on it. Like jump on top of the bale of hay. He's always trying to jump on top of things. Which is why we have to have such a pretty tall fence, and one of the reasons why. We also have bears and wolves and coyotes and foxes. We have some predators, some dogs, stray dogs, that's a fun one. We have our own dogs. But Harry is quite the sheep. He doesn't get a collar with a bell yet. I don't think Harry has earned that. He is very juvenile, very young, very spirited. He's not ready for the dignified collar with a bell yet. The bell would probably be ringing all the time in a frantic, insane way. When they see me, they just start yelling at me, is what it seems like. They see you go outside the house, they see you, they come out, and they start yelling at you. Because, of course, I equal food, and water, and treats, and cleaning up the pen. So, I also equal shots and injections and that sort of thing too. I think that's what the alpacas remember me for, is their monthly injections. They're not as ridiculously social as Harry is. But spinning any of the animals, like, that's what's pretty. I use the word real. I say it's real. That's what's real in life, because there's some things in life that are just plain not real. The world wants you to think they're real, but they're not. They don't actually matter in life, even though at the time it may feel like it matters, such as, do you have wrinkles? Or is your gray hair showing? Or, how big is your ring, or what car do you drive? All these ridiculous things, absolutely ridiculous things. They do not matter. But when it comes to yarn is real. And the animals that give this fiber, like when I sit, it's almost like, you're sitting and you think of your animals and they each have a personality. Like, I genuinely believe if someone were to have a hat made of Harry's wool, it would probably be the most ridiculously happy, like happy-go-lucky, free-spirited type of hat. It would probably rub off into your brain. That's my thought process here. Now I'm talking a little silly, but maybe there's some truth to this. And if you wore Ron, you would be wise and dignified. But if you want to have a good time, just, call Harry. He's the good time sheep. Hermione is definitely more dainty. She's more reserved. And in those moments when she like bounds around and hops around and she's super happy, it's really joyful to watch her do that. And it just makes you laugh. And it's a good laugh. It's not like when you're laughing at something that's controversial or you're laughing at something that's maybe like you're awkward laughing because you feel socially like you have to laugh, or you are laughing at something that you're like, maybe I shouldn't be laughing about this, or whatever. Like, it's not a negative laugh. Like, it's a genuine, like you genuinely feel it in all of you, just the happiness. And it took me a long time to move from angora rabbits to alpacas to sheep. And I often think like, oh, you know, you think to yourself, which do you like the best? Which wool do you like the best? Which fiber do you like the best? Which type of animal is, you know, is your favorite? And it just, I love angora. And they're just so easy to take care of. You can have an angora rabbit in an apartment. You can have your own yarn. Like, they're quiet for the most part, unless they're like hopping up the stairs here, and then they're like really, in the middle of the night, that's actually quite loud. They're wooden stairs, even though they have like fluffy feet. But, you know, angora rabbits are just amazing. They're just affordable compared to alpacas. Can cost thousands of dollars, and they require more land, and they require, if you live where I live, they require maintenance for handling the parasite loads and keeping them healthy, and just, you know, they require more, but it's just wonderful wool. And when there's something special too, like when an alpaca comes up to you on its own volition, not you coming up to the alpaca trying to catch it, but when the alpaca by itself determines in its little alpaca brain that it wants to come by you and it wants to spend time with you and say hello, that's pretty cool. That's a good feeling. So what do you think? What do you think about that? All these thoughts. We don't have any plans on breeding our alpacas. That's a question I do get asked, and we just don't. That's not something in the near future. That's not something that we're going to be doing. It would require us to build an additional outbuilding and have additional, we'd have to fence in more. There's just more needs that we would have. I don't have the experience breeding big animals, and I wouldn't start with an alpaca because of where I'm at in life. I'm used to rabbits, and I don't have a mentor that's close to me. I don't have, we don't have a close vet, so a lot of times it's very much up to us to handle things. Our vet is far, far, far away. And, you know, in situations like that, it's just like there's a learning curve with that. Sheep, on the other hand, I would start breeding sheep before breeding my alpacas. But there's no plans to do that either. That's the question we get asked. Are you gonna breed sheep? Not right now. No. And there's definitely plenty of wonderful alpaca breeders out there right now who would be fabulous and do a wonderful job. I think there's such a thing as too much, like too many animals. And so I always recommend people start out with like rabbits. Start out, you know, if you're completely new to rabbits, if you're completely new to angora rabbits, just start out with one and go from there. Because there's a lot to learn. If it's a young rabbit, if it's a baby and you know it's growing up, it's because it still has to mature, and going through that process where it does mature, sometimes you know the rabbit behaves differently when it's younger, as compared to when it's older. And you know, with alpacas, you can't just start with one because of the way, just the way they are. It's not healthy for them. They're used to being in a herd. And you know, they're used to others. I heard 3 to 5. 5 is an ideal number. We have 3 right now. Maybe one day we can get to 5. We had plans to possibly purchase 2 males, but there were some life changes that stopped that. Because of course, whenever you get animals, you want to, as much as you can, try to be responsible. Long term, you know, there's so much in life that's just unpredictable. And animals, they get used to where they are. And it's like, it's always difficult. You know, if you're attached to something or to someone or to some animal, and you have a situation where you must let that go or let them go, that's a hard situation to be in. Don't worry, we still have much more to ply. We have snow again today. It was sunny yesterday before the sunset, and then this morning I woke up at 4 and it was not snowing, and somewhere around 7:20 it started snowing. It's nice. It's not blowing. It's very wonderful when the snow goes straight down. When the snow is like blowing in your face, that is not as wonderful at all. But it's perfect wool weather. Perfect angora weather, perfect yarn weather. This is the perfect weather to sit and do this. It's like yarnie medicine. Something that I don't like is when there's a super huge halo of my angora yarn. I don't like it. I want some halo, but I don't want it where it obscures every single stitch. And so that's part of the yarn that I spin is that the halo, it does develop over time, but it's not the sort of halo where you cannot even see, it's completely obscured. All of the knitting, all of the stitches, all of the crocheting, whatever it is. I was just looking at this, thinking about the halo. In different types of angora wool, they will have different halos. Your halo from and halo is like the fiber that kind of pops out of the yarn, and it creates this like dreamy, really soft, visually soft, but also physically when you touch it, a very soft effect. Just almost like just this magical natural blurring. So if you want to look stunning, just wear a angora hat that kind of frames your face with halo, and it'll look like you're just this magical creature coming out of the world. People will be like, wow, she's glowing. Yes, she is. Or he. Whoever's wearing it. So far this is going along well. You can see none of it has broken. None of these singles have snapped. The yarn tells you, so if it did snap, it would, that's an indication, depending on how it snaps. I would look at it, is it because I spun it too thin, too tight? Is it because I spun it too loose, not enough twist in it? Is it because it was a poor join? There's all sorts of reasons why when you're plying, if your single breaks, and taking a look, because that's going to tell you what you need to work on to strengthen to make better yarn. And it can be frustrating when that happens, but it isn't the end of your yarn. It isn't the end of your skein of yarn. It's not like now it's done. And of course there's always just starting over, trying again. So we're just over 48 minutes of plying right now. That's about normal because by the time I finish plying this and take the yarn off using a niddy noddy, and then you have to wash it, then you have to set the twist, then you have to dry it. There's more in this process, and each has its own skills for you to learn, and it's just over time. It's amazing how when you improve one piece of this yarn making process, the whole thing gets better. You become better at hand carding, well, you end up improving, the yarn that you're making. You become better at spinning singles, better at plying. All of it matters. Just adjusted the tension. So this fiber is also part of the Spinner's Surprise. The Spinner's Surprise fiber for February. So if you're interested in 3 ounces of this, you can go to Rabbitry and Yarns. If you want to spin this up yourself, that's where it is. Of course you can buy more than that. There's just regular angora, raw angora wool for sale. And it's like anything $25 or more is free shipping, always, at the store. So when I look down and I look at my Lazy Kate, I'm often assessing how much yarn is left. You know, how much on each. Are we at a point where, I just got a sliver. Are we at a point where, does it look like we're going to be pretty similar for when the bobbins are going to run out? In the past, there's multiple things I would do, and I might chain ply as one is done, then I might, you know, get down to one of these singles, and I might just chain ply it, and that's how I might finish a skein. But now, I don't do that. I don't chain ply. Usually. Sometimes I might. But for this yarn, that's not part of how I make it. So if I'm plying 3, I'm plying 3. That's what I'm doing. I'm not switching from plying 3 singles to chain plying one single. So it's all kept very consistent. So even though I have a sliver in this finger, I'll still use these fingers. I'm not just going to stop and correct that situation. I'm just going to keep on plying. Especially because, you know, you're getting close to the end here. And if you listen, the sounds of the spinning wheel, it changes as the bobbin is loaded with more and more yarn. These bobbins can handle 80 grams, can handle, you know, through the start of the 3 ounces. It can handle the 80 gram skeins very well. One thing I don't like is an overfull bobbin, which that's when it's like above the edges of the bobbin, you know, starting to brush against, the yarn is actually just starting to brush against parts of the spinning wheel, and I just don't like that because it's so loaded that the spinning wheel itself isn't, you know, the bobbin, it's not designed to have such a heavy load right there, and especially when the yarn is coming over the edges of the bobbin, it can easily get stuck and trapped. And once that happens, you know, it's very time consuming to fix that. Very, very time consuming. If you have yarn that gets wrapped around the outside of the bobbin, it's not a situation that's ideal. If you have a lot of dander that's coming off on your clothes and a lot of dander that's coming off on the spinning wheel from when you're spinning, from when you're plying, there's some that's always going to come off. But if you have a substantial amount, if you can see it where it's literally coming into the air, that's a situation where if it's your rabbit, you want to pay attention and you want to check for wool mites. Or treat for wool mites depending on what you find. So there should be some dander, because the rabbit cannot get all the way down to their skin to get all the dead skin cells off, but you should not have it just flying everywhere through the air. It shouldn't be like snowflakes flying everywhere. And if you get wool from somebody and it is like snowflakes flying everywhere and there's dander everywhere, unfortunately you have gotten wool that is from a rabbit that either it should have been blown, depending on what type of rabbit it is, or it is a situation where health-wise there's something causing excess dander, and that is most typically wool mites. So that's something to pay attention to if you're purchasing. Now if you're purchasing raw wool, there's always some amount of vegetable matter. There's always some amount of, it's never 100% like hay free. It's never 100% second cut free. It's never 100% like dander free when it's raw. It's just because this is a rabbit, that's just the way it is. If you have something that's hay free, it might be, you might still find a pellet in there, like a feed pellet, or you might find, some staining from when rabbits eat carrots and strawberries. They can make a mess. Which that can be shocking if you feed your rabbit a strawberry and then you walk away and then you come back and you're like, oh my god, what happened to your face? It was just the strawberry. But some rabbits are cleaner than others. Some rabbits are much better with their manners regarding keeping themselves clean and eating without making a mess of themselves. So we're still plying away. Still plying away. The snowflakes are getting bigger. And it's starting to accumulate on there's pine trees, there's a row of pine trees across the road. It's just starting to accumulate on them. I think it'd be cool if there was a time lapse of the snow accumulation on the trees. Because it starts and you barely notice it at first. And then you notice it, and then you really notice it. As the bobbin gets more full, the tension that I have increases to try and pull this yarn into and load onto the bobbin. It is much less tension when I first start. So if I started spinning or plying with the tension that I have now, it would just want to completely grab this in and wind it onto the bobbin, and it would be too much tension to the point that it might actually snap, depending on how much tension I put on. But so your tension obviously matters when you're plying, and it matters to have a more consistent ply, a more consistent twist. Sometimes I'll sit and I'll look at these bobbins and I'll make a guess, and I'll say, okay, which one of you is going to be the first one to run out of yarn? And they're all pretty even right now, so it's very difficult to say. As always, we try to load the bobbin evenly. Sometimes I get off on thinking about something else or just distracted and not paying attention to the bobbin. And so my yarn might load on kind of funny. You know, even flying this, just holding it like this, like you can tell, it just feels wonderful. I am right-handed, so I would sometimes use my right hand. I might hold individually the strands, and I use my left hand as pinching the twist. The twist doesn't follow past my fingers, so I'm controlling where the twist goes to with my left hand. Sometimes I just let it go. If everything's going smooth, I'll just sit there and let this do what it wants to do. Sometimes it needs more guidance. So if you were to guess right now how many more minutes, just take a guess. Which you can't see my lazy Kate, so you have no idea how much yarn is there. So I would say any guess between 5 and 20 minutes is legitimate. Oh, now it's blowing a little sideways. Yikes. So our animals all have inside places they can go to. They have the option of being able to be out or in. So when I look at that outside, if I was an animal, I would probably just stay inside. The cat just came up here. When we first started putting rabbits in the house, Anita would display hunting behaviors and predatory behaviors. So the rabbits always had to be protected from Anita. However, now, over time, the rabbits can be out hopping about, and she leaves them alone. They leave her alone. However, the dog and the cat are a different story. They do not leave each other alone. It's mainly the dog bothering the cat. And then the cat really has no patience for that. So then the dog has to cry because the cat was mean to the dog. And then the humans get involved. So that's how the melee starts. You know, I'm pretty sure when I'm looking down, nothing's changing. I don't know what's going on. That's just what it feels like. As I get to the end of this, as I'm plying and plying and plying, I look down and I think, that doesn't look any different, but I think it's because I'm more frequently looking down, anticipating the end. So I do want to pay attention. You know, once your bobbins are getting towards the end, you do want to pay attention. You don't just want to kind of zone out. Because when you have very, very thin singles like this, if one runs out, it is difficult to feel just on your fingers that one has been exhausted, one bobbin has been exhausted. So you might, for an extended period of time, if you don't really pay attention as you get towards the end, you might just be plying two. And then you have to go back into your bobbin that's been loaded up and figure out where on earth did the third strand end, and you have to deal with that. Which, there's many ways of dealing with that. It's really personal preference. Some of it wastes yarn, but saves time, and some of it conserves all the yarn, but takes more time. Looks like at the very top, the bobbin closest to the wall, closest to the spinning wheel, probably going to be the first one to be done. And then the other two are not far behind. So it does look like this was spun quite consistently, pretty well. Of course, that's one of the things, always trying to pay attention and to take a look and to learn, what can be improved, how could it be better. That doesn't stop. Kind of like the snow. Actually, the snow will temporarily stop. My attention to the quality of the yarn will not. So I could tighten up the tension. I'm really noticing it's having a bit of a difficult time loading onto the bobbin as we get closer to the end. It is just not. It's not pulling into the orifice and loading on the bobbin as aggressively as I would like it to, as quickly as I would like it to. So sometimes that means you can adjust your treadling, but the bobbin is getting full on the spinning wheel for sure. When I look at this yarn, I think, oh, it would be a wonderful headband, it would be a wonderful hat, it would just be absolutely like a wonderful blanket, a nice blanket, because this is lightweight. It's spun thin, but it's so warm, you don't need a heavy, heavy blanket made of this. You can use a wonderful thinner blanket, but it's still going to keep you nice and warm, and it'll be ridiculously soft. Yes, it is going to be that bobbin farthest towards the spinning wheel. That's going to be the first one. And the other two, they are extremely, extremely close. It's difficult to say. Spinning is like, you sit and you feel it with your fingers, and it's almost like reading the yarn with, being able to read the yarn with your fingers. You just feel it and read it and hear what it's, know what it's saying, feel what it's saying. It's telling you, is it consistent? Was it spun too tight? Is it being plied well? Your hands feel it, and then they know that after time, and then there's no words. But the fingers kind of talk with the muscles in the yarn and move how they need to. Which just goes back to the entire magic of the whole thing. Ew. Sometimes when I go from spinning a super fine yarn like this to spinning like a thick and thin yarn and then spiral plying it with thread, like that does not take long at all. Those are very fast yarns to make. And so compared to how long this takes, that feels just like extremely fast. It looks like the snow used to be coming straight down like this. Then the snow was going like this. Now it looks like the snow is going like this. I don't know what's going on outside. Ridiculous. The second one to be done is probably going to be the farthest one away from the spinning wheel, the farthest bobbin away from the spinning wheel. And the middle bobbin is going to be the one that ends up with the most yarn left on it. Did I mention spinning teaches patience? And there we go, we are getting to the last bit. And I just snap them. And the spinning wheel cries. It's an excited cry. Tie the end. Now it's time to take this off. that's it. So it takes about an hour and 17 minutes to make the plying portion. And we'll take it off and wash it, set the twist, all that good stuff. So thanks for joining me in Plying. Hopefully you're having a great time with your own yarnie journey, and we will talk to you soon.